If there's anything we've learned this past year with the coronavirus pandemic, it's that there's nothing we can take for granted. Spending time with friends, cherishing our loved ones, but most importantly, our health, not just physically, but mentally. There's a wide variety of mental illnesses, and they're conditions that can affect anybody. Edvard Munch, a 19th century artist who created the famous painting known as The Scream. Well, the artist was actually painting the state of his mental health, representing the universal anxiety of mankind. And even pop star sensation Ariana Grande struggles with mental health after a suicide bombing at her concert left the singer with PTSD. Mental illnesses are not something to be taken lightly. During the pandemic, 41% of adults have reported symptoms of feeling anxiety or a depressive disorder, up from 10% just 2 years ago. These numbers are even higher in young adults, over half of whom report the same symptoms. Even before the pandemic, young adults have reported increasingly higher counts of substance abuse and suicidal thoughts, and these numbers appear to worsen as time goes on. Mental illness has been on the rise since the early 20th century, and it was even reported that students in the 1990s had the same amount of anxiety as psychiatric patients in the 1960s, and it's only getting worse. But what exactly are anxiety and depression? Well, anxiety is a mental illness described as having intense feelings of worry or fear, from grinding teeth to difficulty sleeping and restlessness and racing thoughts. These symptoms can greatly interfere with one's daily life. Clinical depression, on the other hand, is defined as having a strong, constant feeling of sadness or a complete lack of motivation. People with depression often experience fatigue, cramps, feelings of worthlessness, even thoughts of suicide. With anxiety and depression, even though they're independent of each other, having one of them increases the chance of having the other, and the symptoms of these can also vary greatly from person to person. Everyone with either of these disorders experiences it differently, but there are healthy ways to manage and cope with the disorder. One major problem facing the mental health community is the public misunderstanding of anxiety and depression. Lots of people assume that they have anxiety or depression based on situational feelings of sadness or nervousness. And this assumption is extremely harmful to the mental health community as their problems are trivialized. Everyone experiences moments of panic or gloom from time to time, but the severity of these feelings that people with depression and anxiety face are much worse than people think they are. And since others struggle to understand this, people with mental disorders and their problems are marginalized by society, which makes it even more difficult than it already is to come to terms with the illness and accept help. Recently, research and diagnoses and treatment plans have improved greatly, and there's an increasing amount of knowledge around therapy and medication. However, there are two big problems facing treatment today: accessibility and stigma. In terms of accessibility, the long-term expenses are too costly for many people to manage. Although hundreds of billions of dollars are spent each year on mental health and substance abuse, lower income families often manage to struggle to find the money to pay for therapy and medication. As a result, they ration their medication by taking smaller doses, or they spread out therapy sessions, both of which make treatment less effective and prolong the time needed to recover. Additionally, people with severe mental health conditions usually need rehab or some type of care facility to receive the treatment they need to recover. However, so many of these programs are expensive, and the cheaper options usually have long waiting lists, which means that most people end up not receiving the help that they need. And people who do make it into these affordable programs, they typically face poor conditions and unqualified doctors. And when given improper treatment, patients can be traumatized into believing that trying to seek help is pointless. With the proper resources, people usually spend months or even years in these facilities. But since so many people can't afford to spend this much time away from work, they risk losing housing and their jobs while trying to recover. Additionally, societal and self-stigma surrounding these mental disorders are the reason why so many people refuse to seek help. In many religious or immigrant households, mental illness isn't taken as seriously as it should, and people suffering from these illnesses are often told that it's all in their head or even their fault. They're commonly labeled as unstable, unpredictable, incompetent, or even dangerous. For example, famous singer Britney Spears faced severe backlash following her infamous mental breakdown in 2007. Even after getting treated, Spears dealt with many comments saying that she was psychotic, and she was even told that she was unfit to be a mother and that her kids should be under the custody of her father or her ex-husband. Concerned about facing any type of shame associated with these disorders, many people downplay their symptoms, claiming they're insignificant or ignoring them altogether. To combat the stigma, the most important thing one can do is openly talk about mental health. By not avoiding the topic, it can show to those struggling that it's okay to talk about it and that anything they're struggling with is valid. In fact, research shows that even asking someone about their suicidal thoughts actually reduces their risk of suicide. And if the topic of mental health is more talked about, it becomes much easier for people to get help. And if more people get help, then the topic becomes even more talked about. And this is the type of positive reinforcement that's key to supporting others and reducing stigma. It's important to remember that these disorders are medical conditions that are meant to be treated. They're not irreversible nor a personality trait. And most importantly, they're nobody's fault. Like a broken arm, torn muscle, or any other type of physical injury, depression and anxiety are serious conditions that deserve treatment and should be treated as such. The future of mental illness is dependent on us. If we can eliminate stigma and increase accessibility, more and more people will come forward and accept help. But the process begins now. If someone you know is struggling with a mental illness, support them and listen to what they're saying and encourage them to seek help. Because once you start talking about it, it gets easier. Thank you.